if someone's wrong, we don't want to make them wrong, even though we know that that's the case. But he talks about like we never want to address circumstances because it doesn't really get you anywhere. So what I like to do is just kind of look forward of like acknowledging what happened, but then moving forward to getting to a place where it's safe and they feel cared for, and we can find out what they really want. Welcome to the Miracle Academy podcast. I'm your host, Scotty Cooper. Today we're doing another book review. This one is a book that I use on a daily basis. It's something that's really impacted me in the way I communicate with the world around me. It's called Crucial Conversations, Talking for When the Stakes Are High. I found that a lot of times in my day, especially being in just like a service-related industry, I have to be able to know how to communicate. If I had looked at one thing that really helped me communicate better, this would be that book. So let's go ahead and dive in. A lot of people that I've talked to, that I've trained, I've told them about this book. And what we notice is that anytime there's a potential, like, crucial moment in a relationship, you could always narrow it down to one conversation that can really change everything. So what I look to do is how can I do the best in that one conversation? Because a lot of times that conversation could be something really emotional, and if you don't know how to make that a safe space, it could be potentially devastating. So this is the way I learned that. Looking at it, we're looking at what kind of things does a crucial conversation, what does that really entail? So there's a couple things to it. It has opposing opinions, strong emotions, and high stakes. So if those three things are there, that's going to be a crucial conversation. So what most people do normally with crucial conversations is they avoid them. You can face them and handle them poorly, or you can face them and handle them well. I look to try to handle them as well as possible. When I do these book reviews, I have some parts that I've kind of highlighted that I really like, and those will be the things that we'll kind of talk about. On here, it gives you some examples of crucial conversations. So this would be like the things they listed here: ending a relationship, talking to a coworker who behaves offensively, asking a friend for money, giving the boss feedback, approaching a boss, critiquing your colleague's work, resolving different issues, or dealing with a rebellious teen, or just any time that you feel like the emotions could be high. There's a lot of opportunities to have a crucial conversation. The thing is that your day can have a lot of them in it. I think that if you can employ these tools, you can find a way to do well with it. The second chapter, what I really like, is talking about mastering these crucial conversations. Let me just skip ahead to the part that I really like. Sorry, it's actually the next chapter. It's start with heart. And this is something that I feel like when I'm focused on this, when I'm really focused on starting with my heart, it really makes a difference. So when you're focused on what you really want out of a conversation, it makes it a lot better. A great example was on my way here today, I was driving on the freeway right when I got into San Diego, and on the 5, there was a man on the freeway right in front of my car. And I was driving the speed limit, and this guy jumps out in front of my car, and a normal person might have been like, what the heck, start honking, flip him off maybe, and those thoughts did go through my head, but instead I started with heart. I was like, you know what, that guy, he needs help, and I know that has nothing to do with me, and I don't need to take it as a personal thing. I just know that he's got something he's dealing with, and he ran on the freeway today, and he ran across, and luckily, from what I saw through my rearview mirror, he was able to get across, and I was like, okay, you know what? I started with that thought of like, he's probably got something going on, and that's kind of what you got to do when you start with heart. But the questions I really like when you find yourself getting in this type of crucial conversation is asking, what do I really want for myself? What do I want for the other person? And what do I want for this relationship? What I find is that when you ask yourself these questions, you end up doing things differently than if you hadn't. Because you're starting to think through, like, when you're thinking through that ultimate goal of this relationship with them, it ends up that you say things that you really want to say. So for example, you might be in a potential emotional conversation and you find yourself like wanting to say like, you act just like your mother, kind of thing, right? But you know that if you say that, this conversation is not going to go in a good place. But when you ask like, what do I want for this relationship? What do I want for them? What do I want for myself? It makes you say something a lot different. And instead being more, saying something like, I feel like the behavior you were showing towards me today was less than ideal. It's a lot better than you were acting just like your mom, because you know that that's something that's going to tick them off. When you start with heart and you have those questions in mind, it makes a really big difference. So I find myself always doing that. And I think too, when you're working on yourself first, when you're like focusing on like what do I want for myself, it makes it less about them and really focusing on like what you really want. It talks about the fool's choice. The fool's choice is something that's like, oh, well, we can only do this. That it's like something less than ideal. And it's like, well, it's really not the only option. Like we can have a better choice to make. So the next part is about talking mostly about creating safety in a conversation. The thing is when you create safety in a conversation, you can have a real conversation. The things that I like to do for this is explicitly state what I'm looking to do. So for example, if I have a employee come into my office I need to talk to them about, one of our team members, I tell them like, look, I just want to talk about blank. And also making it clear that we're on the same team, right? Even though it could be potentially like, oh, I'm in trouble because the boss is telling me something. But it's more of like, no, like, let's work through this together. I'm on your team. Like, I want you to grow. And making that feel safe so we can actually resolve the issue. There's different ways that you can notice if safety feels threatened. And when you notice that it feels threatened, you've got to establish it again. So a lot of times it could be something like masking. So this would be kind of like sarcasm, sugarcoating, or just kind of trying to avoid it. Withdrawing is just them just completely leaving, someone getting violent. That would be a lot of ways that safety would not be in the conversation. So what I always do is I look to see if I've established safety, and if it's not there, then I've got to establish it again. And even if you're in that moment and you feel it going away, I stop, I reestablish safety, and we move forward. So a perfect example of this is if you feel someone, you kind of see them like tightening up and getting sweaty and they don't look comfortable. What I like to do is always tell them, like remind them, like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we're in this together and I want to help you. And I always use body language, like leaning forward, kind of like showing that I care, because I do. And that's the thing too, is all of this is dependent upon, like, if you're a person that actually cares, right? The first step is start with heart. If you're not genuine, it's not going to work because you don't care and it's not going to do anything. So I always focus on that. I was teaching one of my interns that what I do is when I'm talking to someone, I want them to feel the energy from me like I love you, right? I really care about you. And when they feel that, they respond to that. The thing is when I greet someone in our practice, when someone walks in and I walk from around the desk and I greet them and I shake their hand, I look them in the eye and I say, welcome. I have that feeling behind my words. The thing is that the words are saying something, but it's really the meaning behind it that makes the biggest difference. But you've got to start with heart. The next part talks a lot about just when you make it safe, just if you feel the safety being threatened, just step back and then step back in and make it safe. Also, when you truly respect them, respect the person you're talking to, that makes a big difference too, because if you don't respect them, obviously they can feel that, and that goes back to the starting with heart. The next part talks about, the story. So a lot of times when you're in these kind of conversations, people will explain a situation and then they add in a lot of things to kind of embellish it, right? It kind of seems worse than it really was. And the thing is that we as people do that ourselves, right? It's easy to spot when the other person's doing it, but a lot of times we're doing it too. I think when we can master the story to like just explaining facts instead of adding in the emotion, it makes things a lot better too. And I like to tell a story that like without the emotion. I'm just kind of stepping back and I'm just being the observer. We talk about this in a lot of my videos, and we talked about that with Roy in my last video about how when you can evaluate something, you can really make a change and make a difference. And that's kind of what this talks about, is when you are talking about a story with someone, or there's a situation that happened that you have to talk about with someone, when you're just sticking more to the facts and not like embellishing the emotion you feel behind it, you guys can actually figure out a solution. This is a part that I use a lot, and it says stating my path. And I like it because I do it all the time. So this is like the big thing that I took from it. So they made an acronym. This is STATE. So STATE is share your facts, tell your story, ask for the others' paths, talk tentatively, and encourage testing. The first 3 skills describe what to do. The last 2 tell you how to do it. That's the thing that I have on my phone. I have it like starred, like that picture of that page, so I can remember that. That's a part that I always like to do. There's another part later on that I have also on my phone that like when I need to remember how to do this. At this point, a lot of it's just kind of second nature because I really practice it a lot. But the having it on my phone was nice to really, when I was learning it. When we listen to other people's paths or other stories, there's 4 skills that the listening tools that are great. So it's ask, mirror, paraphrase, and prime. So we ask them to kind of get things rolling. We mirror to confirm their feelings. So we're going to, reiterating that. Paraphrase to acknowledge the story, and prime when you're getting nowhere. The thing that I really like too, if you watch the video with Glenn, we talk about if someone's wrong, we don't want to make them wrong, even though we know that that's the case. But he talks about like we never want to address circumstances because it doesn't really get you anywhere. So what I like to do is just kind of look forward of like acknowledging what happened, but then moving forward to getting to a place where it's safe and they feel cared for, and we can find out what they really want. He goes into a lot of really good depth in that video. If you haven't watched that, I would highly recommend watching that video. This is my favorite part of the book. It kind of puts it all together for you, and this is the part that I've got on my phone. So, kind of the big key things to take away from this book. Principle 1 is start with heart. So the skill is focusing on what you really want. So the question you ask yourself is, what do I want for me, for others, for the relationship? How would I behave if I really wanted this? What I find too is that, this is kind of my opinion, I don't know if it's true, but it sounds good, is that when you're in this moment and you think to yourself this question of what do I really want, I would think that asking yourself this philosophical question requires more blood flow to the brain and out of your extremities. And the thing is, when you get upset, like all the blood goes to your hands, to your feet, so you can run away or to fight. But when you ask yourself this question, I feel in me it kind of goes back up to my head so that I can actually think clearly and not think of a place of fight or flight. The next part is talking about learning to look for when the conversation gets crucial, look for when safety is threatened, and then notice the way that you are when you're under stress. So I notice for me that I get kind of sweaty, and I kind of noticed a couple of signs. So when I start to feel that way, I start asking myself, what do I want? How can I establish safety again? The next part is, mastering my stories, so retracing my path to action, separating a fact from stories. And like I said, the state my path, that part's great. And then when you move to action, really deciding how you decide and document the decisions and follow-up. So this is like, how do I want to, continue on from this point, and how can we make this better? But I think that anyone that's in a position where you are either managing people or you're talking to people, I think this is a book that's great for that, because it helps give you, here's the steps, here's the little acronyms and things you can learn to like how to be in this. Like I said, I highly recommend reading this. I've had a lot of people that I've trained, I've told them to read this. But when I look at something that I use every day, it's these things. I think especially starting with heart and establishing safety in a conversation. And I do it all the time. I do it at restaurants. I do it, like, for example, like I've got, my dad has an onion allergy, and my sister has an onion and garlic allergy. So oftentimes when we're at a restaurant, people will mess up the order. And we just know that a lot of times it's going to happen. That might be a premise, but it just happens a lot. And I think that for a lot of people, it could be really annoying, right? When we have to get the food taken back. And the difference is when you can tell the person in a safe way, when you're still caring for them, that what they did was not right, but we'd like to have it fixed. And it's kind of funny, there's been a lot of situations where that started a relationship with a server or a manager at a restaurant, but then it actually turned into something greater because the way we handled it and the way we acted in response to the error was really cool. And that's kind of what I look at, is anytime there's a potential mess up, how can I fix it? One of the really cool ones too is my wife was at Michael's. And for those that know me, I don't like going to craft stores. It's just not my favorite thing. My wife likes it, my sisters and my mom likes it, but I just don't. And we were at this craft store, and this particular person was rude to my wife and made her cry. And of course, being someone that cares for my wife, I thought, like, okay, well, I'm going to call the manager and complain. I wasn't there, but my wife called me crying, telling me about how rude this person was. And so I validated everything and I acknowledged it. And I said, okay, like, I'll handle it. She said, no, I don't want you to yell at them. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I called Michael's and I asked to speak to their manager. And I just filled her in of like what happened. So I just stated the facts of like, your person was rude, and I acknowledged that something could happen. But then what I did was something a little bit different. I started with heart, and I thought I saw an opportunity for how can this organization be better at this specific location. And so I said to the manager, I run a business and I consult for people, and I constantly train people on like how to serve others. And I think that our experience today was less than satisfactory, and I think that I have a way for you guys to get better. And she said, okay, that's very interesting. And I prefaced this call when I got to the manager. I said, this is going to be something very interesting, and you probably haven't heard this before. And she said, okay. And so I started off seeming kind of harsh, like, this is what happened with my wife. But then I kind of switched it to, I would love to come in and train your staff of how better to handle situations that aren't as positive. And she said, wow, like, I never expected to get a call like that. Instead of just yelling at me, she says, I get yelled at all the time, but instead I had someone offer to help me. Unfortunately, because of our corporate structure, I can't accept that. But the way that you handled that, I've never seen before. And this happened shortly after I read this book. And it's just a different way of looking at the world. When you look at like, how can I be better, and what do I really want? And when you ask yourself that, you can find it. Once again, highly recommend it. Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High. Thank you so much for watching this book review. Let me know if there's any other books you want me to review or talk about, or things that grasp from it. And, I'm open to suggestions. I've read a lot in the last few years, so I love doing these. But anyway, thank you for watching the Miracle Academy podcast. And I'm your host, Scotty Cooper. This is our Miracle